Hi, I'm Terry Thompson, author of the novel Daniel, Prophet at the King's Command. This will be out the end of this month, actually, the 30th of March. It's now on pre-order. It's a Bible-based, well historically researched novel about the prophet Daniel. And each week on this weekly video, I highlight a little aspect of the book that I think would be interesting to you. And this week especially is going to be interesting to you because I want to talk about the first thing that almost each of you think about when you think about the prophet Daniel. Not that he was exiled from Judah to the empire of Babylon, not that he served over 40 years as King Nebuchadnezzar's second in command of the Babylonian Empire as a Hebrew, not that he gave us probably the greatest prophecies that we have today, particularly on the end times, but about the one night that he spent in the lion's den. That's what you think of when you think of Daniel. And I didn't spare anything in the book. I researched it a lot to see just what about this? Why was he thrown into the lion's den? Why were there lions? Why was there a den? Why was he executed this way, or attempted to be executed, of course, until God saved him? Well, you all know the basics of the story probably. Um, after Babylon's fall to the Persians under King Cyrus, the regional king from Media, Darius, uh, often pronounced Darius. I'm not sure which is the best way to pronounce it, but Darius took over the kingdom, and miraculously, he again elevated Daniel to a high position in the government. After him serving so many years under Nebuchadnezzar and the other kings of Babylon, um, Daniel served with two other um, commissioners, as they were known at that time, over the entire empire of Babylon. And Daniel was over the Babylonian or the Babylon province, the city, the metropolitan area of Babylon. Now, it wasn't long until Daniel started proving himself, even at 80 something years old. Okay, he was ancient, but he was proven to be um, a better overseer of the government than these other two who had less experience. Remember, Daniel had been doing this his whole life since he was 15 years old. And there was jealousy among the other two, and they tried to get rid of Daniel. After several attempts, nothing was nothing was happening. And so they said, the only way we're going to get rid of this guy is to pit him and his God, his Yahweh, against Darius, the king, and use some particular laws of that day to make that stick. So um, they talked Darius into um, coming up with a decree that everyone for a certain period should pray only to the king and not pray to any of their pagan gods. And of course, that meant that the Hebrews could not pray to their God either. So um, we knew from the first of the book and in the Bible story that that even though Daniel managed to be amazingly successful as the second ruler of a pagan empire, he would never ever go against his God. He would never commit blasphemy against Yahweh. And so he wasn't going to do this, and they knew he wouldn't do it. And the first day of that decree, these two backstabbers, commissioners, would catch Daniel in his prayer time, and they did. They they basically walked into his house and caught him praying, hauled him off to Darius. Well, Darius didn't want to do anything, but there was a thing called the laws of the Medes and the Persians, or the Persians and the Medes. And that law specified that when a king made a decree, he couldn't back it down. He couldn't make exception to it. That law was to protect protect the people from the king making a decree and then picking and choosing who he was going to apply that decree to. He couldn't do that. He had to apply it to everybody, and he couldn't change it. And they reminded him of that, and they reminded him that the punishment that he had enacted on this decree was to put any violators into the lion's den for the lion's dinner, to execute them at the lion's den, subject to those wild lions. Okay, so Daniel was hauled off to the lion's den, much to King Darius's chagrin. Now, why lions? Why a lion's den? Well, first of all, why the lions? Babylon just idolized lions. Lions were, we know from archaeological digs, lions were on everything in the buildings and the grandiose architecture of that day. Lions represented power. They represented conquering of whatever got in their way. Now, because of that, the elite of Babylon loved to hunt lions. The kings, the high-level executives of the government, the major economic providers, they loved to hunt lions, and they usually did that by trapping. So what would happen? They would go out. See, I researched this, and it really is interesting. They would go out and hunt lions and trap lions, bring them in, and put them in a structure, a stone structure, kind of like a pit that they had built just for that purpose. And there was always lions there. And when someone wanted to hunt them, they would let a few of these lions out to roam their normal habitat of the plains and the woodlands. They weren't like bears. They didn't stay they didn't naturally stay in the dens, but that's where they kept them. And they would release a few and go hunt them. Kind of like a catch and release operation from a fisherman's point of view. Now, they put Daniel in this den, and you can just imagine the drama that produced. Daniel thought he was going to meet his death. He was praying that God would miraculously save him, but I think at 80 years old, he thought, well, this is how God's going to take me out of the world and put me into eternity. So he went into the lion's den, fully expecting to be eaten alive. And I play this up in the book so that you can't help but really get into this and feel like you're right there with him in the den. And all of a sudden, the lions were hushed. They came near to him, but they didn't eat him. Okay. And he looked up and saw a human-like figure standing in the dark shadows of that lion's den, with his hand stretched out over the lions. And of course, that was the angel that God had provided to do a miracle on Daniel's behalf. The next morning, of course, Daniel came out of the lion's den after it was opened up by the soldiers, and Darius was right there to welcome him. And Darius said, "Did your God, did your Yahweh rescue you?" And he said, "Oh yes, Your Honor, your King, Your Highness, he did." And the king was so glad. He hugged Daniel, and then the Bible says, then he ordered those who had conspired to put him there to be fed to the lions instead, and their family, and their wives, and their children. And I really wrote this in a way that I think it will capture your imagination also. So that's just a little bit of a taste of what went into this story in the book that takes a lot from secular history and integrates it with the biblical story of Daniel that really tells what we need to know spiritually about that story, and makes it for some tremendous reading. And this is what I do throughout the book. So, hope you enjoy that when you read the book. And remember, it's not going to be until almost the end of the book, just before he relays his prophecies that was shared to him by the angel. So he was about 80 years old. Most people don't think of him being 80 years old in the lion's den, but he was. It was toward the end of his life. So that's it for this week. I will share something else really interesting for you next week. Go to my website, terrythompson.org, and order the book if you haven't already. Order it by pre-order. You're only going to have to wait just 3 or 4 weeks for it to be shipped to you. But it's to your advantage and to my advantage. There's a lot of things that helps the book by pre-ordering it. So I want to urge you to do that. You can go to Amazon or any other of your favorite book dealers online. Of course, it won't be in the stores until after it's released, but order it online now. And you can go to my website and scroll down. I've got even a link there to Amazon. Takes you right to the page of my book, and will be very, very convenient for you. So until next week, God bless, and you have a great week. We'll see you then.